What's up, y'all? In this video, we're going to be going over exhaustion zones, as you see by the name of it. I use exhaustion zones a lot in my strategy. A lot of the things that we actually go over, whether it's support and resistance, whether it's candlestick analysis, exhaustion on your candles is going to be very important. And when you get up to these higher time frames of when you're getting to the H4 and the daily and the H1, and you have these exhaustion zones, it can serve as, some people see it as supply and demand. I don't really do supply and demand, but I do think of support and resistance when I look at these zones. So when I'm actually looking at them, we're about to zoom out, and again, we'll do a top-down analysis like we always do when we're hopping into the market, okay? But just understanding where you are in the market is always going to be important. On a weekly time frame, I don't mark the whole exhaustion zone just because the zone can be so large because it's based on the weekly time frame. So again, on the weekly, I'll do a horizontal line just to show this level of support down here. Again, we could look at another horizontal line up here for another level of support, or resistance, support, support, come back up for resistance there, okay? And just based off where the market is right now, this is all we really have to mark for our support and resistance based on the weekly time frame. And then when we come down to the daily time frame, this is when we can actually start to put in some of these exhaustion zones and start to actually look at how the candlestick anatomy is actually in the market, okay? So if I'm looking at price all in this area up here, one thing that I would do is I could see instantly, and I always color code these based off the time frames. So the daily time frame, I go gray. H4, I'll go light blue, and anything below that, I'll either go yellow or, clear with just, a black box, okay? But just looking at this here, when we're looking at it off the daily time frame and seeing exactly how this exhaustion is forming for the candlestick analysis for support, we can see support on this exhaustion, resistance on the retest, resistance, 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 support, resistance, and resistance, okay? And when you actually mark some of these zones, it's going to be very fluid. It's something that will probably change. The higher time frames, it won't change as much because it takes a while for those levels to actually be retested again, and for those levels to actually be hit. But once you get into the lower time frames, your zones are going to end up changing. You have to continually adapt to the market. But this is something that I always look at for just an extra confluence, okay? I'm never trading off just one confluence. I'm always looking for several in the market to make sure I am actually correct, all right? So when we're looking at it, even if we're looking here, and some of these, they're very temporary. I won't always need them, just like this one would be here. Right here, we see that we have support, resistance, consolidation here on this higher daily time frame, and come back up to retest for resistance on a lower high. Okay, so that shows the exhaustion zones right there. And again, this is very simple. It's something that I realized once I put into my trading strategy. It's something that helped me a lot because it helped me with patience and understanding that these zones have to actually be hit for structure to continue, or for the trades to be valid with structure, okay? So again, looking at it, we have bearish exhaustion here, and again, this could actually be put on this exhaustion zone up here, but we use the bearish exhaustion at this level. And again, this is a psych level here of when you get into 7,500, support, resistance, as it gets into there, okay? And now we'll be able to go down to the H4 time frame, and I usually use exhaustion the most on this time frame here. Not because I would say it's better than any other, but I use my structure, and I depend on the structure from the H4 time frame a lot, along with the daily. You're supposed to use every single time frame to get the right understanding of what's happening in the market, but I use it a lot on the daily time frame because I like how the structure always forms on these time frames, okay? So just understanding where we are now with price, we could put the exhaustion zone over here, or here, because it is going to end up dragging across very nicely, okay? But one thing that I also see, and one place that I actually see price actually retracing right now, is if we place an exhaustion zone here, and I will change this to blue because we are on the H4 time frame. Now, if we look at this a little bit, we can see that price gave us a support. We consolidated all over this level. but once we finally broke it, we got a lot of bullish exhaustion at this level here, and we'll actually get a H4 level dragged across here to show that this bullish exhaustion was actually very prevalent. But just to look at it, I could see a retrace coming back down for another level of support to actually form. It's not something that I'm going to be forcing. It's not something that, you know, it has to hit this level for me to end up getting in this trade. I'll definitely adapt and see how the market's moving. But just looking at structure, just looking at exhaustion and how much exhaustion was shown on the bullish upside of these H4 candles here, I could expect price to give me a nice push back down to this level down here. And the pushback down from where price actually is now, it's really not that many pips. It's 45-50 pips. Okay, so I could definitely see price coming down to this level, and it helps me with my patience of knowing exactly where I want price to end up retracing, and I believe it will help a lot. All right, and again, just looking at the exhaustion that we actually have up here, I would always mark these levels of exhaustion just to show. Okay, now of the target that we'll actually be looking for, let's see, I could see price coming up here into this zone here. Alright, so if we're actually looking at this, and let's just say we're pulling out our fibs, one thing that I would do is I would go right here. Alright, and our fib target, once we get the retrace, will be right in this exhaustion zone of where we have a support, resistance, and we didn't actually reach that full resistance up there, but I do believe after we make a support level after a valid retrace for the next higher low, since structure was broken and this was a very high exhaustion zone here, structure was broken, create support and give us a push right to our target inside this H4 zone at 68,800, okay, or even 68,700, just somewhere in this level of where our target is, okay, and somewhere within this exhaustion zone up here. All right, again, looking at the exhaustion zones, it is very simple. It's something that I believe any trader can put into their strategy, and again, a lot of people use the zones, a lot of people think of them as order blocks. The people that trade that other strategy, order blocks, you know, supply and demand, all those other things, I just call it for what it is. I don't need a fancy name for it. It's just exhaustion. Okay, price tried to reach these levels on the lower time frames, and we'll zoom in on the M30 just to see how price actually came up to these levels on the lower time frames. But when we get to these higher time frames, price ended up retracing back down and rejecting the level. Okay, so that's what exhaustion is. You know, price went to a level, it wasn't fully ready to touch that level, so then it's actually rejecting from there, and we could definitely use these as key levels here. You know, it means a lot more when, you know, you have price going to a 68,500 where price is right here, okay, where we have this exhaustion coming down, and when we make this next support going up for the buy, that will be very nice, and I will show how prevalent the exhaustion zones are. Okay, let's just look at one more. We're going to clear this chart up. I think there's writing on it. No, there's not. Oh, that's a little bit. Now, if we're looking at this again, we won't go up to the weekly time frame on this one. I'll just show you the daily and the H4 zones that I would set for GU in this situation. But just looking at this, just look at these exhaustion zones that are forming. Okay, we can mark them out with the ellipse, but let's just do it with an arrow right now just to show where everything is on the daily time frame. Okay, now we have support with bearish exhaustion, support with bearish exhaustion, and price was at a support with bearish exhaustion where it closed out last week. Okay, now a lot of these here, this is flowing structure actually on the daily time frame. As you can see, there's a lower low, there's a lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low. So based on the daily time frame, we will be looking for a daily lower high to be made. We're not quite sure exactly where that could be yet, but just understanding what's happening here, if we were actually looking for price to retrace, plot out the fib and just look at it. Okay, so now I wouldn't actually be too worried about this daily exhaustion zone coming up and being hit. It could happen, you know, there's a lot of momentum on the lower time frames that's actually pushing GU up right now for the retracement from the daily time frame standpoint. But you know, I'm not worried about price coming up here. Price could end up stopping at this level of where it at, and we'll get to that on the H4 time frame as well, which we'll go there right now. Okay, so just looking at how price is, and again looking at price from the H4 exhaustion, where this actually is, it was broken, okay, where the structure is. So now if you're basing it off the H1 and the H4 time frames, you'll be looking for buys. Okay, if you're looking for it on the daily time frame, and this is where it becomes a little deceiving, becomes a little confusing. If you're looking at it on the daily, you'll be looking for sales. So let's just look at exactly why we will be looking for buys on the H4 time frame. Okay, and if we pull our fib, or not our fib, but our exhaustion zone over, we turn this to blue just to show that it is on the H4 time frame. Now we have lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low, and we actually broke this level right here of where we have 19300, and we're actually retracing now after this break of structure on the H4 time frame. Okay, just looking at it again, we know the daily time frame is bearish, but looking at all of these exhaustion zones, this could be a level of support possibly forming here. Okay, now another zone that I would actually key off and mark on the GU right now would be right here, just to show that we have a possible inverse head and shoulders. Okay, and again that would be left shoulder, neckline, head, neckline, and then it could be right shoulder somewhere around here for a push back to the upside if price does want to come up to this level up here of the 21500. But just looking at these exhaustion zones here, I like to just mark them off just to make them clear to myself on what's happening with price. Okay, that exhaustion zone there was structure and it broke. So at this point here, I will be looking for buys on the H4 time frame. We'll wait for the H4 support to be made, possibly get some more exhaustion on these candlestick levels. But just looking at this, it's very simple. You know, it's support and resistance at the end of the day, but we're not doing it exactly like that. We're just based off where price was trying to go and where price could possibly test again and get back into those levels, just to reject it one more time, whether it's on the top of it coming down for support or the bottom of it coming up for resistance. Okay, it's pretty simple. Let me know if you guys have any questions at all about this. It's something that I use a lot in my strategy. If you're in the Discord and you see that, you can see that on my confluence list that I send out with all of my trades, there's more than likely an exhaustion zone being tested, an exhaustion zone along a psychological level, you know, support and resistance off that exhaustion zone, whether it's H4 daily or H1. And yeah, so it's something I use a lot. It's definitely a way for you to start to understand the candlesticks and get your candlestick anatomy up, and it's something that could definitely help in my opinion. So yeah, I hope this strategy actually helps you guys. Hope you enjoyed the video, and again, reach out if you have any questions.